Hey, this is Todd. There's an often spoke of axiom in regards to GMing that says you can never be too obvious. And I believe that wholeheartedly. However, I also think that we can even go further and up our games by not only being obvious, but being more than obvious, embracing exaggeration and theatricality. As often happens, these videos, I start off, I want to talk about one thing, and then something else just grabs my attention and just won't let go. And this is one of those cases. I had been looking on Facebook, reading through just some of the things that come across the various Dungeons and Dragons groups, of which there are a few that I'm a member of that I will read on occasion. And one of them came up with a GM who was devastated. It seemed like, at least that's the way it came through. She had her party enter a place, and when they crossed this place, it was cursed. They turned into kind of animal people, but animal versions. I think she said that one of them became a Loxodon. I think that's don't get correct me, but I believe that's one of the ones from the Magic the Gathering crossover, and they became, as an elephant person. I think they didn't lose any class abilities. They didn't lose anything, but some of the players were just really not happy with it, upset. I think threatened to quit. And she got a lot of feedback from GMs who were rightfully, I think, kind of, on her side of it. We're saying things like, hey, this is part of the game. Stuff like this happens, and the players need to go with it. There was another segment of the audience, of the people participating in the thread, that were talking about player agency, which I think is, I don't know if I know I've mentioned that, I think, in some videos. I feel like it's a very overused phrase at this point, and I don't know where things like agency is supposed to begin and end with things like you being subject to magical effects or things like that. Because if you take your human PC and they get turned into a Loxodon, have you lost agency? I don't know. I tend to think not. But that's neither here nor there. But we have that, okay, hey, that's fine, right? There were a lot of those responses. There were responses of, well, you kind of took the stuff away from the player kind of thing. When I read it, my read of that is that, yes, I think the players could have handled that better. I think you always can handle things better than just slamming the dice back in your bag and threatening to quit and go home. There's always a better option than that. When I'm trying to look at it and be constructive, you could say, okay, she could have not done it. She could have done something differently. Okay, what could the players have reacted differently? But when I look at it and say, maybe what it was maybe the crux is that she wasn't obvious enough about the context of this zone. I think in her post, I think it's a she, so apologize, he, them, in their post, they just mentioned kind of crossing over into a country, whatever that is. What does that mean? What is the context for that? And when we're trying to create this context, how much of it should we do? And my thing is always do more than you think. If you feel like you're beating them over the head with the context of a situation, maybe even that's not enough. But if you feel like you're being subtle, do more. Because for me as a player, if I look at it, if I was in that situation, what would make me upset about it isn't not necessarily, probably isn't, oh, I turn into this elephant thing. For me, I was looking at like, well, what could I have done differently? Like, how could I have escaped this situation? Assuming that it is a curse. Okay, I walked into it, and now I've got this curse on me. What could I have done differently? How could I have sussed it out? Right? What did I miss? And if I can't think that I missed anything, and granted, some of that might be on me, but I'm thinking around and going, I don't know what I missed. That's when I might get like, okay, I feel like this GM just kind of threw that at me. There's just an invisible line, and we cross it without warning, and we're turned into animal people, and there were no sign, no nothing. Maybe there were signs. Were they obvious enough? And why wouldn't you make them obvious? If I'm a GM, and this came up in my game last night, I guess, for instance, not the same. I didn't turn anybody into animal folk. My players came across an inn, a public house, a way station at a crossroads. And inside this way station at the crossroads were some undead. I was thinking about how to kind of bring the situation, right? How to give them the kind of cues that I think are out there, that the fact that you had this undead infested inn. So when they got saying in closer, okay, what kind of things did they figure? Okay, well, there's no, it's quiet, right? There's no no sounds. I mean, this is one of those tropes that's used all the time. When something nasty's going on, the birds are quiet. What does that mean? All right, so one of those big cues. So yeah, I threw it out there. The birds, you don't hear any birds. All those sounds you kind of normally hear, nothing. There's no movement. It all seems to be still. You don't see a mouse. You don't, certainly not any people. Just nothing moving. So it's eerily quiet, eerily still. And this is very theatrical. I don't know what undead would be like in real life. I don't know if everything would run away. I don't know if it would make things like that true. But that's kind of what we associate with those kind of situations. So I played into it. Yeah, this thing. And not only did I even went one step further. When they got closer, they could see that the window shutters on the bottom floor and the door were sort of barricaded from the outside. All these different cues to give them sort of an overwhelming context of there's something in that inn which is either unnatural or that's not right and clearly was, trapped in there, put in there. So when they came to it and the party messed around and they kind of by hook and by crook and by accident let loose the undead, they could put all that stuff together in their head and go, oh yeah, okay, that makes sense, right? All this stuff, yeah, I get it. That's here. If we now turn that to this other situation, okay, there's this area that's got a curse on it, turns people into animal creatures. What might that look like on the ground? When I talked about undead being sort of unnatural creatures and maybe in a sense saying, okay, they're unnatural, so it actually sort of deadens nature around it, right? So you don't get the normal sounds and normal movement. It's like nature. It's like this little void, nature void there, right? This undead thing's energy, whatever you want to call it, presence, sort of muting all the natural stuff around us. So what might a zone of this weird transformation curse look like? Well, maybe we don't see like, okay, there's literally a force field that's shimmering, right? We're not gonna see that. What is the grass like? What are the grounds like? Does the grass transform as it goes through? So you have normal grass on kind of one side of this invisible line, and then it's maybe monstrous on the other side. Do they see like tracks of a squirrel, and then they hit across a line, and suddenly the tracks look vastly different? Is that something that they could discover? What kind of tales are people telling about it? In myth and fable and all the stories, they're always tales. It's not just some plot in the middle of nowhere that does it. It's got a name. People stay away from it. Stuff gets known. If it's just there was never a time when two guys were walking and one guy crossed over the thing first, turned into some kind of monstrous humanoid, and then the other guy was like, oh gosh, this place is cursed, and ran off and told the rest of the village, don't go down that road. It's cursed. Maybe the sheriff or the local authority actually barricades it off or puts soldiers there to keep people away from it. And you certainly wouldn't want your populace to turn into these kind of things. So how might they do that? And when you're thinking about these things, don't be subtle. Your players are going to miss subtle. And that's not even a judgment on your players, whether they're new players, old players, experienced players. You're just going to miss it because it's very easy when you're thinking to be subtle as a GM, knowing all the information you do, that you're being subtle for yourself. Like if I know everything, then what's a really subtle clue? But the players, they don't know everything. So for them, subtle is just going to seem like nothing at all. And they only have one shot at it. It's not like a movie or a book where you say, oh, this was a great movie, 2001. So dense, so much stuff in there. Or like I've been delving into The Shining. If you're all interested in The Shining, there was that movie Room 232, I think it was called, or 237, and there's some of the people who are involved with that, and there's a bunch of people who have just deep delved into The Shining to like the millionth degree, come up with all kinds of crazy stuff, and I've just been addicted the last few days on YouTube and just watching all these different really interesting, kooky, crazy, amazing, just super videos of people diving in there. But they're watching The Shining 100 times and to get all this stuff. The players, they're experiencing your situation really the one time. They've just got whatever leads up to that moment and hits it. And so if you don't set it up well, people are going to feel cheated. They're going to feel like I wasn't given the information to get this, and now I'm an elephant person, and I don't want to be. And maybe it's inevitable they become elephant people, and then it becomes something of a different question. I mean, there definitely is questions of, as a player, how much do you allow? How open are you? And I talked about this in a different video about sort of one of the things about improv being that, as if you're playing improv, you're conditioned, you're trained to roll with the punches, to take what other people throw at you and just go with it. If that means that you start off a scene as a fireman and then someone comes in and changes the scene to your soldier, you just do it. That's just part of it. Players, especially just the way the modern mentality shapes up, they're not necessarily as open to being that, but that's another question. Video for another time, or you can watch that video on improv. I will try to remember to link it. But we can lessen that as much as it can be lessened. And some players are obviously gonna, it's always gonna be your mileage may vary. Some players are gonna be very accepting of it. And some of the players in this person's game who kind of inspired this whole video, they were accepting of it. And some others are gonna be very not accepting of it regardless. But the way you can try to lessen that unacceptance, get people to buy into it the most, is when they can look back at it and see all the stuff that was leading up to all that context comes through. There's a phrase, I've seen different variations on it. I think one I remember looking up just before I started this video because I wanted to make sure I had the phrase right. Bill Hader, who was on SNL and writes and directs, I think stars in Barry on HBO, if you have that, you saying that, performing is all about, you're really playing to the back row. And what he means by that is when you are on stage, whether you're going to play or whether, I think, obviously doing Saturday Night Live sketch comedy or stand-up comedy, whatever like that, is you can't just play to the people who are right up in front of you. The people in the front row, they've got a great view. They could see you. They could see all the nuances and everything as much as they are there. And they're going to get all that. But the people in the cheap seats, the people at the back of the balcony, the people at the back of the standing room only, they're so much further away. They're not getting all that nuance. They're not seeing all the stuff close up. So you become theatrical. You emote more. You go big. I think the kind of acting that we associate with Charlton Heston or William Shatner, where they're going big, they're over the top. But in the situation it makes sense for is that working in the theaters is you're making sure that the people in the back can understand what you're trying to convey to them. And it's the same thing people have said about wrestling. I was listening to something when talking about the classic wrestling in Madison Square Garden and how the style of wrestling there was very theatrical. Why? Because you're an MSG, particularly in the 70s and 60s before, where they didn't necessarily have all the huge screens hooked to cameras so that everybody could kind of see up close. You're far away. They're tiny little guys doing tiny little things down there. Well, how do you make sense of it is you have to act big. So as a GM, act big, right? You don't have players who are playing with you at the other end of an auditorium, but at the same time, you can't expect everybody to have that front row perspective. Not everyone's going to be at the same level of engagement or engaged in the same way. Not everybody is going to be picking up the things that you're trying to deliver to them. All kinds of things are going on in people's brains. People's brains are wired differently. If you just limit yourself to thinking, well, these guys in this level I'm going to get, but I don't care, or I'm just going to lose all the people behind them or who are not at that level of engagement, means that you may lose a lot of your group. Obviously, if you have a group that's all composed of folks who are front row center, that's great. I think we all wish that everybody was like that we could have that kind of group. But I think it rarely happens. So you have to adapt your game. Go big. Be expressive. When I was having them walk up to this inn, I didn't say, it's a little bit quieter. I didn't say, well, it might be a little bit quieter than it was, and maybe it's a little bit less going on. No, it was dead quiet. Exaggeration. Not a soul is moving. Nothing moves. Well, it's literally nothing moving. And of course, and people get that. Oh, the blade of grass is not moving. The wind's not moving. Like, no, nothing's moving. It is still. Metaphorically, but in a real sense, it is still. Nothing is happening, right? Ominous wind is blowing. the way that, maybe the sky darkens if they're right. You're entering this zone. Let's say go back to the zone of transformation. Maybe there's clouds that are always just kind of swirling over it in a strange way, almost like it's a hurricane or tornado, some kind of spiraling action there. Why? I don't know. It's you have this zone of magic that's a massive amount of magic that has this effect over a whole area of country. Maybe it does affect air that way. Maybe it does have some interaction with the weather or atmospherics. But when you see that coming up now, suddenly as a player, whoa, I might take pause. Maybe I haven't even looked and noticed anything about the ground shifting or changing, but I noticed that there are clouds circling. Okay. Now let me do some discovery here. And it doesn't just have to be the stuff. I think the first level is, hey, hit those 5 senses. Visually, what's different about it? Okay, well, there's grass, and all of a sudden there's these monstrous shrubs, and there's, you go from little tracks, and suddenly they cross over a line, and they become these kind of massive tracks. What sounds might be different? The birds might sound differently here. The calls might be, and I don't know if there are any rules to the transformation. It was just random. What kind of animal calls might there be? Maybe there's none. Maybe it's got, again, this is unnatural. So maybe you say, okay, it's kind of voided out this kind of sounds of nature. But what else might there be? Are there any smells going on? What else? Is there anything like the hairs on the back of their necks? Is it going up? Are they getting a tingling sensation? Any kind of unease? That kind of thing. But we can also pull back another layer. And if this zone has been there for any length of time, I just have to think it would be discovered. And I think that's myth and fables full of these places. Why do they call those the Cyclops Hills? Because there's a Cyclops that lives there. And granted, maybe the Cyclops kills everybody that ends up on that hill, but somehow, some way, somebody gets off that hill to tell everybody there's a Cyclops. Same way, like in that first Pirates of the Caribbean movie, someone was able to figure out that the Black Pearl and all this stuff, and Johnny Depp said, well, if the Black Pearl's killed everybody, then who's coming back to tell the stories? I don't know, but there's always somebody, right? So you just assume that somebody at some point saw this thing, came back and said, don't go over to those hills. I don't know what would they call those hills? I don't know, but maybe they would come up with some name. Well, you can't go into that area anymore. It's off limits. We're going to call it the Madness Plain, or I don't know, whatever it is, right? You come up with a name. Oh, the Madness Plain, or that's what it is. So then when the party goes, oh yeah, I think we've got this map and it's leading this area over here, and they go into town and say, hey, do you know anything about this area? Oh gosh, don't go in there. It's the Madness Plain. Okay, but now they have something to go for. Well, maybe they can go ask somebody, well, why do they call it the Madness Plain? They go, well, weird things happen. It transforms you, literally transforms you, transfigures you. Maybe that's what it is. The grasslands of transfiguration. If you go in there, you're going to get transfigured. Okay, is there a way to get untransfigured? And maybe there is, maybe there's not. Maybe that's where you get thrown. I don't know, but there's a tale that says that whoever goes in there and does this thing, not only will they be able to untransfigure themselves, but they'll fix everybody else who is transfigured. Maybe that thing just happens to be the MacGuffin that the players are after. So now at least they know, okay, we're going to go in here. We got to get this thing, the rod of untransfiguration, because it's a piece of the rod of 7 parts, whatever it is that we need, to help us stop the Orcus cult from summoning him to this plane. But there's a side effect, which is that it's going to do this other thing. And now we know, we can be prepped for the fact that when we step across somewhere in there, it's going to transfigure us in some way. We don't know what it is yet. Maybe no one's done enough research to know what it means, but we already have in our mind, we have steeled ourselves the knowledge that we're going to go in there and somehow we're going to be transfigured. We can plan for that. We can get it down in our brains. We can just become a little bit more at ease so that when we hit that line and we get transfigured, we go, oh, okay, this is what it is. All right, interesting. But we kind of knew what happened. Maybe we could, maybe we'd equip ourselves a little bit because we knew. I don't know how we're going to get transfigured, but I'm going to take the scroll of remove curse, or I'm going to go ahead and memorize, if we're playing, an OSR type game, I'm going to memorize detect magic, or I'm going to memorize remove curse, or I'm going to do something else to kind of prep for it, at least see if those things work. Maybe it is just the fact that we could cast remove curse and get rid of it. Maybe we can cast dispel magic and get rid of it. Maybe something else will work, or at least we have it, right? We can prep, we can make those things. So we feel more in control. We feel like we can make choices. And I know in several of my videos I've talked about that. I really think it's a big thing for players to feel like they're in control, that they can make choices. To make those choices, they need data, and that data creates a context for them. But if you make your data super, super small to comprehend, if you make these little blips that are supposed to differentiate one area from another so small, right? If you're looking at a microscope, yeah, they're going to seem like huge mountains and valleys. And as the GMs, we're generally looking at things with microscopes. But then you zoom out, it just looks like a flat line. Knowing this problem, well, how do we fix it? As going full circle back to talking about being obvious, one of the other things when running mysteries and things that are mysterious, they say throw as many clues, right? Don't worry about how many clues you throw. Some folks talk about the 3-clue rule. I think I usually talk about the throw clues everywhere you can. That's certainly one option. But clues are easily missed, and what's a clue to one person and one to another? Make them obvious. Be obvious. Don't worry. Be theatrical. Call it the planes of transfiguration. It's on the nose. Yes, it's on the nose. Who cares? The point is that why wouldn't it be on the nose? If that's what it does, people are going to name it. You call that place the Dragon Mountains because dragons live there. Be obvious. Be theatrical. Lean in to the performative aspect. Use exaggeration to really get your point across. If it's just a little bit quiet, who cares? If it's dead quiet, oh, suddenly I'm paying attention. Same thing. Oh, you what is that? The hills of spiky grass? What does that mean to me? Nothing. It's the hills of transfiguration. Well, oh, now I'm paying attention, right? The more you really lean in there, the more you just put it all out and put it on your sleeve, so to speak, and instead of trying to keep it close, the more your players are going to feel enabled, the more they're going to feel in control, the more they're going to feel that they have everything they need to make their choices, and they're still going to make mistakes. They're going to make the wrong choices. They're probably going to blunder in there just like my party, almost just by a hair of their chinny chin chins avoided 2 PC deaths when they were when they tried to interact with that inn. But you know what? They all were well aware of it. They knew there was something bad there, and they knew that they were opening that door, as opposed to like, oh, there's an inn. Oh, okay, is there anything unusual? It's a little bit quiet. Oh, okay, I opened the door. 8 undead pile out. Okay, that would feel more like a gotcha. But now it's like, oh, look, there's an inn over there. What does it look like? Oh, it's dead quiet. You don't see anything moving, and it seems almost spookily just still, and all that. Then suddenly, okay, well, I know I'm going to be taking a chance, and I'm going to make that choice to take that chance, or we can hightail it the other way. Now it's up to me. I'll feel better. That's all I have today. As always, if you appreciate this video, let me know in the comments and give me the thumbs up if you like this kind of thing. Feel free to hit the subscribe button, and I know there's that bell thing that will alert you to when I post videos. As of this recording, but it won't be good only for about the next 5 days or so, I do have a Kickstarter running for my Zine, Harrowed Grounds. I will post a link in the show notes. We're going to have stuff like this about OSR play with a focus on hex crawling and sandbox and sort of sandbox gaming. So if that stuff sounds good to you, please give it a look and consider backing it. But other than that, have a great rest of your day. Be safe, be healthy, and game on.